Hi, everyone, and welcome to the second episode of our 2021 Fringe Cast series. Today's episode is going to be focused on creating a media and marketing campaign for your Fringe show to get those all-important eyes on the story that you're telling. These are hosted by the Fringe Society. We're the charity that supports and underpins the Edinburgh Festival Fringe. And I guess we should start with our introductions. So, hi, everyone. My name is Alan. I'm the registration manager here at the Fringe Society. Katie?
Hi, my name is Katie Queen. I am the artist development manager at the Fringe Society. Becca?
And I'm Rebecca Monks. I'm the communications manager at the Fringe Society.
Yay, so that is us. I guess, as always, it's important that we start by giving a little bit of context about who the Fringe Society is and what we do, I guess. So as I said, we're the charity that underpins and supports the running of the Fringe. We don't run the Fringe. We don't program the Fringe. The Fringe is an open access festival. That means anyone who wants to take part with the story to tell, with the venue to tell it in, can do so. If you're wondering about bringing a show and the possibilities of that, stop right now. Head back to episode 1. That is all covered there. We don't want to, it's a lot to fit in. So basically, if you're wondering how to do the Fringe, how to make it happen, we have a whole episode for you that you'll find in the playlist of this YouTube channel where you're finding this show. Katie.
I am taking over the hosting duties today because Alan is one of our experts in marketing on the Fringe and I specialize in another area. So I thought I would be the host and Alan and Becca could answer all of my questions that I have cooked up. So first and foremost, Alan, you've been working here for a pretty long time and you've also been an artist on the Fringe. Can you give a bit of context about the Fringe Society and what we do in terms of marketing? Because you mentioned Impartiality a minute ago, and it would be interesting to understand what that means for marketing individual shows.
Yeah, so one of the key parts of the Fringe Society Constitution is to market the Edinburgh Festival Fringe to the world. And that is one of our key aims, goals, tasks as an organization. However, it's exactly that. We're marketing the Fringe as an event and then supporting artists as part of that. But what that means is we're a very... I always go to say dysfunctional family, but it's actually a very functional family in that we love all of our children the same. We won't ever highlight specific shows as like, oh, you should go and see this one. That's not what we do. We kind of represent all of the shows in one. So what that means for you if you're bringing a show to the Fringe is chances are you're self-producing, which means you're running things by yourself, solo, or you're with a company. It's not the case of, oh, you're coming to the Fringe, so the Fringe are going to market your show. We won't market your show for you. What we will do, as I said, is market the Fringe as a whole to audiences, but then also offer support to individual shows that need it, which, Becca, you may be best to give us a quick intro on.
Yeah, so this is kind of brand new for 2021, as a lot of things are. What we found after 2020 was that people were in a completely different position with their ability to market and who they were marketing to. Audiences, media, reviewers, editors, they were all in a completely different space when it came to the arts. And we kind of took that moment to pause and think, right, well, what if we weren't as impartial, as Alan said, as maybe we have been in the past? And so while that principle of we market the Fringe and not individual shows, we're not a PR company, is absolutely still in place, we have tweaked it slightly just to kind of be as effective as we can be in this new space. So what we would do now is we'd be happy to kind of share information about your show, your venue, your production, wherever we can, but with the big caveat that we wouldn't say, this is the best Fringe show you can go and see. So, for example, if you've just registered a children's theatre show and you want us to try and amplify your messaging throughout our press releases or on our social media or any other kind of platforms that we use, like e-bulletins, we could say, here are tickets to this children's theatre show that's happening on this date at this time. But we wouldn't say, hey guys, this is the best children's theatre show that you could ever see in the world and it's 5 stars from us and we love it, goodbye. So basically, we'd help to amplify some information, but we wouldn't express a preference or market it in a way that a PR would, for example.
Folks, you do not know how excited I am. This is a brave new world.
I'm so excited. So I started when it was I started in February 2020, as we talked about last time, a beautiful time to start at any arts organisation. And it was, impartiality was quite a thing to get my head around. How do you market the Fringe without really talking about those specific shows? And I think this is a brilliant way to really access that.
Yeah, for anyone who's brand new to the Fringe, I cannot emphasize enough how much is with us, impartiality has always been king kind of thing. It's we want everyone to get the exact same experience. If we can't offer it to every single show, we don't want to do it. And it's one of the things that we've really looked at since a sort of forced pause of being in our bid to keep things as fair as possible, it does actually mean that people are limited or we're not giving as much support as we could to artists. So the fact that we've now been able to sort of redefine what that means and have found a way of keeping things fair and consistent, I think is key. We'll be consistent with what we do. And it's also another reason, basically keep in touch with us. On whatever sort of part of the journey you're on, we've got several key email addresses that are really good. So participants@edfringe.com is an email that is, if you're at the beginning stages, not sure what you want to do, trying to find a venue, try to lock down things, that's a great stage. If you want to grab me or my team, registration@edfringe.com deals with the process of, you're coming, you're trying to get everything sorted. And then we have media advice sort of out the other side of the process, which is if you are looking for sort of help or further context or any questions on anything that comes up in this Fringe cast, media advice at edfringe.com is probably your first stop shop.
Brilliant.
Definitely.
So, sorry, Becca, go ahead.
I was going to say, would it be useful if we kind of talked about the kinds of things that we could do and we couldn't do as more kind of specific examples within that?
Yeah.
It's quite confusing. We're saying we'll be impartial, but to an extent.
And how do people engage with us as well to get that word out there? Do they tweet at us? Do they ask us for a retweet? Can they email us and get us to share that information on their behalf? It would be really good to understand the kind of parameters and how people can engage.
Totally. So I guess one of the things that we could do is interact with selected informational social posts. So if you have a link to tickets on edfringe.com and you tag us and it doesn't say anything that kind of would imply a preference from the Fringe Society over other shows, we'd be happy to retweet that. We could mention particular shows in our media releases if you make us aware of them in advance. So, email media@edfringe.com. If you have something that you'd really like us to draw out, we can definitely look at that. We're looking at also featuring artists and participants in our wider campaign, which has image compilations, films, that kind of thing. And what we wouldn't really do is, like I've said, share anything with an opinion or a preference that's attached or implied. And we wouldn't undertake sole or significant marketing and PR duties for any individual show, company or venue. We also wouldn't write a comms strategy for you that's kind of overarching. So basically, if you have something you want us to amplify and help get the word out there, we'd love to do that if we can, because we're running at a bit of tight capacity. And that's the other thing to mention here, is that our intentions are good. And as Alan said, the thing that's held us back from doing this in the past is that if we can't do it for everyone, we won't do it for anyone. So there's a chance that something might get missed or slip through the net, but just talk to us, because we're still working this process out and we're bound to fail on some level and succeed in others.
Yeah. So you mentioned we wouldn't obviously do a comm strategy for anyone, Becca, but we do have tools that we can offer to artists where they can build their own marketing strategies and press releases and all of that sort of information. Can you tell us a little bit about that? And Alan, feel free to jump in here as well, because I know you've done some of this work in the past.
It's so not like me to jump in for Kate already.
I know you're very, very quiet this episode.
Yeah, totally. So we have a lot of tools and assets available to participants, as Katie said. It's very practical things like how to write a press release. So we'll give you a structured guide to making that press release as impactful and interesting as it could be. We will give you contacts to reach out to key media and people that would be interested in reviewing your show or helping amplify the news about your show. We can give you access to specific PR organizations and individuals that can do that greater marketing work. So if you're looking for a contact in that area, you're looking to employ a PR that can do all of that kind of strategizing on your behalf, we can make those introductions for you if that's something you'd like. Alan, what else is there?
Yeah, so I think what's important to say is, so all this is for registered shows. Yeah. So when you register, you've got the process of like proofing and approving your show. But once you've decided like you will go on sale, the day before your show goes on sale, we will email you, like the registration team, kind of as like us handing the baton and the process over to be like, that's you done, you're registered, you're going on sale tomorrow. Here are some tools and tips to help you along the way. So that's where, like Becca mentioned, the media contact list, which is going to be a sort of 2021 version, which I'm actually quite excited about because it sounds like we've pared it down, but actually what we've done is simplified it, because basically I think 2021, everyone's realized no one has time for any kind of faffing now. It's a lot more to the point. These are the journalists that are coming. These are what they said they're interested in, and giving you a chance to contact them. We'll talk a bit more about sort of PR and media later on, but we'll give you templates for how to make a press release and kind of the hints and tips of what should and shouldn't be involved in that. And then also we're going to have like our logos available for you to use on any artwork or any campaign materials. And excitingly, I think this is the first year we've ever done this. You'll have a campaign specific. So in the same way as all shows will have a marketing campaign, the Fringe Society will have one. We say this as if it's top secret and it's not been out in the world, but this will air after the first on sale. Shows will be on sale now. We're
living in the
tickets.edfringe.com. So you will see like parts of our campaign. Registered participants can be a part of that campaign. We will send you an element from it. So as you're able to use that in your marketing and really feel like you're sort of really part of something, particularly if your show's an online show and you're not going to be in Edinburgh in August. We want artists to feel involved and as part of the Fringe as possible. It's going to be a bit of a long recovery for the Fringe and the arts for everyone in 2021. And classic Alan cheesy moment of the Fringe cast, genuinely like everyone pulling together is going to make everyone's life a bit easier. So it's one of these, I think these updates that you're talking about, Becca, is actually like, yeah, shows engaging with us helps us amplify everyone. Us work with your venue, talk to your venue partners. So as kind of that collective positive noise about the Fringe and what's happening will kind of help everyone. That sounds a bit self-helpy, but I think it's true.
I completely agree.
You know, as we're building the Fringe back up, it's really useful to get your insights and feedback on what marketing and media helped you as participants as well, because all of this will be learning for the future, because I think we're all learning from the beginning again. That's fair to say.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think that once people start to get in touch through media advice at edfringe.com, you'll start to understand a bit more about what people want to learn this year, and we can better build resources to help artists that way too. So start getting in touch. Becca, what's your inbox? This
is probably quite an exciting time as well to plug what's happening at the end of this episode. Because I guess we're about to go on to sort of speak more specifically about different types of advice. But one thing we're very aware of is that things have changed a little bit. Like our specialist knowledge of how the Fringe works has changed this year because we're doing things we've never done before. So yeah, we've been researching and learning, and we have loads of different factors to help us stay on top of everything. But actually, we're all entering a bit of a brave new world. So Becca actually has interviewed the lovely Emma Martin, who's an arts marketing consultant, and who Katie will be doing an event with us as part of our Fringe Connect, Fringe Central program.
Yeah, so Emma Martin, she's really great. She does lecturing at Mount View as well as freelance arts marketing consultancy. And she's going to be doing an event with us as part of the Fringe Connect program this August. So her event is going to be the 5th of August. So it's kind of right at the very start, the day before the Fringe kicks off, to equip everyone with as much information as they can possibly get before they really kick into August. But we're going to have a sneak preview with Emma at the end of this episode. so that we can get all of her top tips before, so that people can really start their marketing campaign in advance of August. So that's really exciting.
Yeah, because I think Emma's got some really sort of proven specialist knowledge in that online space.
Yeah.
And that's really great, because I think that's this year what a lot of people will be thinking is new for the first time.
Exactly.
I'm wondering what the differences are.
Yeah, and Emma's been working through the pandemic as well, so we'll be able to show how that practice of arts marketing has adapted over the past year and a half. So it's an exciting interview. I'm looking forward to it. Okay, so as you said, Alan, just before we introduce that little teaser, you said we're about to get into the actual advice. So I think this is a really meaty part of the episode, and something that is probably, a very solid base, always a foundation for marketing. I don't know how much it will have changed in this new world, but can you give us a little bit? I'm going to go with Becca to begin with on this one, but a little bit of information on knowing your show and how to pitch it to your audience, and also, I guess, to the media.
Yeah, I guess I give a bit of context there and just say in my former life, I was a journalist, and specifically an arts journalist. So I did a lot of fringes and got a lot of pitches and a lot of press releases. And the ones that always stood out for me were people that had a very clear idea of what their show was about, why they were bringing it, why it was different from other shows, and they could express that succinctly and kind of passionately as well. That was always really key. So Alan's talked quite a lot about the first step of marketing your show, understanding the why you're here. So I'm actually going to throw to him because he speaks so beautifully on the matter. But yeah, before you kind of get into the nitty gritty about what kind of things you should be including in your press release, understanding your background as an artist and why you're bringing it to the Fringe that particular year is always like the first step.
Yeah, I think, thank you, Becca, for throwing to it. This is the bit I get quite passionate about, because I think
just love hearing you speak about it.
It's just, I did the media advice role within the Fringe Society for a long time, where I spoke one-on-one with artists right through the Fringe about how to market their show, and also have been an artist with a show at the Fringe trying to make that happen. And I think so often, and I see this from personal experience as well, I did this. People jump to, oh, I want reviews, I want to get bums on seats, I want to do this, and this. And it's great because those are good goals to have. But actually, people kind of jump the first step. Like, people forget what is my show? Like, they're busy like writing press releases and contacting the press, but they haven't stopped to go, actually, what is it I'm selling? What are those unique selling points or hooks? What's my elevator pitch is the term you'll hear quite a lot, which is essentially just like if you were in a lift with someone and it's the time it takes to go from like the first floor to the fifth floor, like what could you tell someone about your show? And the reason I get really passionate about this is because when I had my own shows, I used to dread when someone would just be like, oh, you're doing a Fringe? What's about? Tell me about your show. I would literally hate people doing that, because chances are you've been working on your show for like a year, like since the first time it was a thought in the back of your head, maybe more than that. And you know every nuance, every bit of subtext, everything about your show. So to suddenly sum it up in 30 seconds about what it is, I think it's actually really hard to do. And I think the reason why I go on about this a lot is I think it's a really important thing to stop, physically write down, like you would a sort of scripted part of the show, a paragraph on what is the show. If you can, like other people who are involved in the company, or if it's a solo show, other people that you trust or have seen your work before or have read the script, like everyone throwing down bullet points of what the show is, because chances are someone will come up with something that you hadn't thought of, but literally distance yourself from it. It's kind of switching from I don't like to say creative because it should still be creative, but almost like the business side of your brain about, okay, what is this to a stranger? And I think a lot of the time it's remembering what you loved about your idea or about your story or about your show right back at the start. Because if your experience is anything like mine, there will be various points in your journey towards the Fringe where you will hate your show and be like, why did I ever think anyone wanted to see this? And then you'll get back and you'll remember that it's all okay. But remembering like those initial points that you loved about your show, like that's actually the core of your market. If you don't stop and get that bit right, I actually think everything that comes next will be less successful. It won't be as successful because you've kind of skipped a stage.
Like Alan, I've also had Fringe shows in the program in the past. Just a couple of playwrights over here.
I'm the only one that hasn't. I feel left out.
Next year, Katie. This year, registration is open.
COVID the musical. I'll see it now.
I'm still waiting for it to register.
Go ahead, Becca.
Well, I was just going to say that everything Alan said, I absolutely agree with, and it's so important. But the other side of that for me is remembering that people outside of your team and outside of your mind don't necessarily know the basics of the show. And that was something I always forgot. So I'd kind of launch into these passionate diatribes about how it was an exploration about obsession and heartache and all this stuff. But actually what they wanted to know is it's a one-woman play. It's on at this venue at this time. And this is the cost of it. Don't forget about the basics because that's so important. A lot of people are at the Fringe and they're there to be surprised and entertained. And, once you've hooked them in with the crux of it, so it's a musical, it's a puppet show, it's a one-woman comedy stand-up event, or just a stand-up show, I think that's what it's called, right?
I think so.
Once you've got that nailed, I think then you can move into that space of how would you define it in a sentence, like Alan said? Why is it important to you? What's the crux of it? But don't assume that people would know all of that information just because it feels obvious to you. That's another big tip from me.
I think it's exactly what Becca said. It's sometimes a case of you can't see the wood for the trees. I always say, and I hope this show never minds that they're very much an analogy now in my head, but there was once a show that we met at a road show that we did back when we traveled and saw each other in person in Liverpool. And we met this great company who were speaking to myself and my colleague about their show. And it was all about two British builders who went to renovate Saddam Hussein's palace. But then there was political unrest while they were there, and they ended up kind of becoming political prisoners, but in absolute luxury of this palace. So they were telling us all this story, and I'm like, oh, that's interesting. It's based on a true story. I'd never heard this. It was really interesting. And then 15 minutes into chatting, I sort of asked the gentleman I was speaking to, I was like, oh, what's your role in the show? And he was like, oh yeah, I wrote it, but also I play Saddam Hussein. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. That must be a really difficult role to get into. And he's like, oh, well, I know him. And I was like, sorry. And he was the person who created the show, was the person who was kept prisoner. It was his story. And I was like, sorry, you were kept prisoner by Saddam Hussein, and now you're playing Saddam Hussein in that story. That is your hook. And it's to him, that was just yeah, I'm playing him. I'm telling the story. And it's exactly what Becca said. It's actually, your hook was so obvious to you that you missed it. I was like, everything I've said about advice is changing. That's your number one hook. That's what to lead with.
I think that's what they call burying the lead.
Yeah, but it's so easy. I say it's so easy to do because you're so close to it. To you, you're like, oh, obviously it's my story. I'm playing Saddam Hussein. But you forget that actually people don't know that.
You mentioned, Alan, the woods for the trees. And I think this really, really happens a lot as well when people are talking about their audiences, because I think with the Fringe, the idea is that the audience is so vast and so willing to take risk that, your audience is everyone. It's so wide. But actually, I think it would be really good to touch on knowing your audience. And again, it's that thing like with your USP, narrowing it down to a very, very specific set of people.
Yeah, absolutely. Because your audience is never everyone. There's people out there that don't like Beyonce. I don't understand those people, but they exist. And that's really important because in the end, and I hope you agree with this, Becca, you don't actually just want any audience. And I'm not saying exclude people, but you want people who you think will enjoy your show. So if someone in the traditional normal Fringe of old, I would always say there's no point you flyering outside a very typically stand-up sort of part of town, like late night comedy, if you have like a really intimate one person show that's a theatre piece happening at 11 a.m. the next day, like that's throwing sort of time and energy in the wrong direction. So basically, I think like for marketing, you might spend money, but more importantly, like your time and your energy and your resources chasing the wrong people and not be as successful. Whereas if it's just a case of thinking about, okay, who are the type of people that will be interested in my show and where can I best find them?
Definitely, because I think that translates to the energy in the room as well. If you've got people who that subject doesn't appeal to, that format doesn't appeal to, and they're sat in the audience, that's really going to impact the vibe of the experience for everyone, from the fellow audience members to you as a performer. So that's huge, I would say.
It's also really disheartening giving out flyers or approaching audience members that just have no interest in your show. And, you know, especially when flyering was so prominent, giving out flyers and then looking back and seeing somebody throw them in the bin immediately. You know, you want to be giving your flyers to people that are encouraged and enthusiastic about the kind of show that you're putting on. You don't want to waste your time. It's exhausting.
Do you know what? This probably feels like a really good time to kind of talk about flyering really quickly, because that's something that will really change for 2021. It's something I don't envisage there being a lot of. Like, I wouldn't really encourage people spending lots of money on like print. One, people may not feel as comfortable taking print just in a COVID landscape. But also, the print has never been what's important about flyering, I don't think. It was always the reminder of the show, the reminder of a conversation. And I think that's what's important. The act of flyering should be, if done effectively, the act of having a conversation with someone. You could stay out there for an hour and put bits of paper into like 100 people's hands and get nothing back from it. Whereas you could have 10 conversations with people that you are exit flying another show. Like, you're talking to them around when they've been to another show that's like yours, or you've met them at an event, or you're in a sort of Zoom session and you are in a breakout room and you're talking to them. Those conversations will and can still happen. And that's what when we say about elevator pitches and stuff, that's what we mean. It's being able to talk confidently about your show.
And that, I think, translates into trial and error as well. Like, you can see what messages are landing with people. So if you try your USP on 10 people and they're not that interested, switch it up and see if you can pull out a different strand. You know, switch from telling people that you're playing Saddam Hussein to that you were his prisoner. See if that makes a difference, that kind of thing. Yeah.
And I think that's a really good, because also the flip side of that, when you find what works, stick to that like glue until it stops working. If different members of the company are talking to different people and then you're like, oh, hang on, Jessica over here has got like 12 people into the show today while Paul has got no one in, like, chat, like what are different people saying and what's working? Like, literal real life example, like my first Fringe show, we were beyond the Royal Mile flying, and you learned some people loved the fact that there was Burns poetry in it. Particularly our American listeners. Americans responded very well to the Robert Burns sort of aspect of the show. Other people were like, someone actually was like, do not say the words Robert Burns to me, because they just didn't want to hear that. They felt it was like a sort of type of tartantry and sort of fake Scottishness. And I'm like, okay, cool. But those people then responded and were like, there's actually puppetry throughout the show. It's Scottish new writing. So like, there'll be different angles. As much as we're like, get your elevator pitch, that should have some ebb and flow in it, so as you can respond to different scenarios and different people, which, Katie, I guess works for like, also if you're looking to like take your show and market it to people who could take it on to have another life elsewhere.
Yeah, completely. Like, if you were wanting to take your show onward touring, you need to find out what works for people and how you're speaking to them, because you really need to target your approach. Like, if you say, again, we'll go back to the one person solo show. If you're wanting to take your show on the road, you need to figure out where a one person solo show is going to fit in that landscape. It's never going to be on an enormous stage built for musicals. So you need to do that research. research and you need to target your approach for each person you're discussing the show with, you're completely wasting your time if you're discussing your show that just absolutely does not fit into the venue of the person that you're speaking to. But equally, they will know who the person is that you should be speaking to about that. And similar with the media, I guess, you might be talking to a publication that talks about comedy, or that writes about comedy, and they're never going to publish a piece on your solo show, but they might know publications that will. So, finding out more about the people you're talking to as well. What are they into? What do they want to hear about? Because it might not be your show, and they might have suggestions for who to talk to. But equally, if you're getting to know other people in your venue, other people doing online shows, you can put them forward to that journalist or that venue, and you can help to and this leads into the cross promotion thing that you were talking about, Alan. It's supporting each other to find the right people to talk to, and to find the right audiences for your show. Yeah.
And something I really want to give as a bit of advice for what Katie just said is, if you're talking to someone in whatever context, like whether this is an event, flyering, whatever in the street, be really actively communicating with that person. Like, no one likes someone, and it's probably, particularly if you exist in the arts, you've probably been in an event where someone is talking to you but has their eye just over your left shoulder because they've just seen someone that they think may be more important for their show, or and that is the most frustrating thing. And I think actually you're much better. So if you find someone who's like, oh, your show's not their thing, you could at least, rather than just be like, oh, what? Then you're of no use to me. I'm going to go over there. You're like, oh, what is your thing? Like, because you just talk to them and actually like have a real conversation, like, because then they could remember you down the line. And the Fringe is both massive and small. Like, the community is actually quite small and tight, and like word gets around if someone is great or someone has been like sending the same email to loads of people and like following up, demanding a response when it's only been 2 days and everyone's really busy.
I think the key thing to remember there, Alan, and it is the most inherent thing in networking, is everyone loves to talk about themselves. So yes, you might want to talk about yourself, but remember, the person that you're talking to wants to talk about themselves. So the best way of making connection is asking them about themselves. They will love you for it. They get to talk about themselves. They get to talk about, if it's another artist, they get to talk about their show. If it's a journalist, they get to talk about some shows that they've seen. Ask them what they're into. Ask them what they've seen. Ask them what they've enjoyed, what they haven't enjoyed. Same goes for the industry. Ask them what they program. Ask them what they're looking for. Ask them what collaborations they have on offer. That's how you're going to make really solid connections, is by asking questions and showing an interest and building a relationship, because a relationship at the end of the day is what you're looking for. It's not a flash in the pan opportunity, or, if it's an article in a newspaper or online, it's not just one. You might get a few out of it if you build a relationship with that journalist. And the same with audiences. If you build a relationship with audiences for this year and bring back another show in the future, they'll remember your company, your name as an artist, and they'll come back to you in future years as well. So it's all about relationships, the Fringe.
Yeah, I guess something we want to move on to, and it's very much your area of expertise, Becca, is like how to talk to media and journalists and what they're looking for. But just to round up this sort of section, something that has become my kind of buzzword of late, and like it was in the sort of 2019 Fringe, I'd really come around to this way of thinking. One of my top bits of advice for marketing your show at the Fringe is understanding where your show sits in the context of the whole Fringe, which actually with a smaller Fringe this year will be easier than ever before. But it's a case of like, the Fringe is so big and so diverse that people are constantly wanting to break it down, whether that's audiences working out what they want to see, journalists working out what they want to review, industry working out what they need to see in order to engage with it. It's really important. And if you can approach someone and be like, oh, my show is a solo show that's dealing with activism and the various forms of activism around, much like X, Y, and Z. Or, oh, do you know the show that was really successful in 2019? This is how my show is similar to that, but unique in its own thing. Like, never underestimate that, because actually it's something that few people actually do. And if you can sort of have an awareness of where your show sits in context of the whole, I think as soon as you start talking to someone, you sound like you really know what you're talking about and that you're being serious. The difference between someone being like, I've got a show and it's never been seen before and it's the best thing ever, versus someone being like, oh, I've got a show that's kind of like of the hot brown honey variety, but then it's got this twist in it. And it's like a couple of shows that are happening in Summer Hall this year. Like, I'm instantly like, this person knows what they're talking about.
Yeah, it was like a few weeks ago, we were practicing some pitching and Becca wrote in saying, oh, it's like my show is like a mix of Train Spotting and High School Musical. And every single one of us immediately were like, yes, we want to see that show, because it's related to two shows that we really, really enjoyed that somehow didn't belong together, but felt like they did. And it's just like relating it to something that's well known, that people enjoyed and is somehow exciting is such a good way of explaining what your show is about.
I'm going to register that show next week, Ellen.
Great. That sounds
I think we called it Fringe Society the Musical, right?
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah. So the next, I guess, thing to talk about is, and we touched about it on a little bit a while ago, Alan, it was cross promotion. And it comes into that relationship setting and, you know, getting to know people that are doing similar work to you. I guess in a year like this, it's much harder to find artists because a lot of people will be doing online work. A lot of people will be doing in-person work, but it's maybe a different context and people might be slightly kind of more separated and further apart in Edinburgh. I would like to talk a little bit, because it's not launched yet, so I don't want to give too much away, but we're launching a new digital platform called Fringe Connect. And I guess it does what it says on the tin. It's essentially an online platform for connecting with peers and industry at the Fringe. And so it's going to be a project that's going to be more long-term. It's not just for this year. It's kind of part social media, part event space. So it's going to be hosting all of our online events this year that maybe in the past would have been hosted in Fringe Central. So there's going to be networking events and workshops, discussions. In fact, Emma Martin, as I said earlier, is going to have an event on there on the 5th of August. But apart from that, it's also, as I said, social media in a way. So you go on there, you build your profile, you put in as much information as you can about yourself, about your show, about your ambitions, about what connections you want to make, what your Fringe history is, what experiences you've had in the past. And you can use that information, but people can use that information to find you, but you can also use that information on other people's profiles to reach out and make connections. So you'll be able to private message people on there. There's going to be some discussion forums where you can reach out to people doing similar shows to you and discuss different methods that you've used for marketing, and you can help each other market your shows. There's going to be an opportunities listing on there. So that will be really helpful for finding opportunities, for connecting with people, for finding maybe performance opportunities at the Fringe. There's going to be participant discounts and all that sort of stuff. And it's really exciting. I think it'll be a really good way of connecting with people doing similar work and finding those opportunities for cross promotion.
Yeah, I think it's something that people often forget, but like artists talk to each other. A huge proportion of people involved in the Fringe are artists of some sort.
The biggest, I'd say the biggest proportion.
Yeah, making those connections with people. One, they could directly come and see your show, but two, one, it gives you like a little bit of a network. It gives you, it's particularly if you like this jumps up from being like this is a good bit of advice to a crucial piece of advice. If you're a solo show, if you're a one-person band doing everything alone, connecting with other artists and widening your reach through that is so important. So normally this would happen, be like, oh, we've got similar shows. Like, do you mind if I exit flyer for your show? Is that okay? Can I get your venue's permission? That kind of thing. Or I'm going to give you like a shout out at the end of my show. Loads of that is still possible. Like, so there will be in-person shows, and in-person shows can still do that. But in an online space, like if you're doing a live stream, absolutely, like shout out other acts and other artists to see. You'll be doing like, most people will be doing a bucket speech or a sort of call for donations at the end of their show. Like, if you want to be like, if you've enjoyed this, like follow me on social media, do all this, but also support these other acts that are like me. If you're at one of those Fringe Connect events or you're talking to someone and your show's not for them, you could be like, yeah, but I've seen like X, Y, and Z, and I think they sound really up your street, even though it's not quite you. Like, it's a really good way of just like amplifying your voice. Also, I know we're going to talk about it specifically after the press and media stuff, but like social media is sometimes really hard to constantly have content to say if you're talking solely about yourself and plugging your own work. Whereas if you can be celebrating other people, it actually allows you to be amplifying your own voice, but talking about something else.
Yeah. And it is that thing of like not constantly shouting into the ether on social media, saying the same thing over and over again. It's changing up your content, and it comes back to that thing of not always talking about yourself in networking. If you're amplifying other artists, if you're amplifying other voices, people will see you as a generous person. They'll see you as somebody that is wanting to support others. And so they'll be more likely to support you in return. And I think that's so important this year above any other year in the past.
Do you know what makes sense? So we've got two sort of main topics left to discuss. One is social media and how we get to get most out of it. And one is about content and press media. It feels like maybe we're on social media now. It feels like we should address that. And then Becca will use the sort of PR media chat to bring us home before your interview with Emma. So how would you, Becca, like in terms of someone planning their social media campaign, what are the most important things that they should be doing?
So first and foremost, look at which account you're sharing information from and deciding if the people that are following it and that you are following are relevant before you start posting anything. So if you're a new theatre company and you've not got many followers, posting about your Fringe show isn't going to be seen by a vast amount of people. So before you kind of start creating the content, my absolute top tip would be curate your audience and look at that follower list. So start following people that are going to the Fringe in 2021. Or that have been in 2019 or engaged in our digital stuff in 2020. You can find them by, using our hashtags, hashtag make your Fringe. A lot of people use hashtag EdFringe21 as well, hashtag EdFringe. Search those and see what people are talking about the Fringe, who's interested in it, and who would, ask them to follow you, follow them back, start the conversation. And then once you've done that, start thinking about the kind of content that you want to put onto that channel. So like Katie said, you don't just want to be talking into the void about my show. Interact with other artists that are coming to the Fringe, start liking their posts, asking questions about where you can see their work, questions about what kind of work they're creating. But also don't be afraid to post links to tickets that you have for sale. Post any kind of sneak peeks about the work. So if you have like behind the scenes videos or behind the scenes photos, that kind of content works really well to get people excited about going to see your show. It kind of goes back to what I said earlier in that don't assume people know anything about your production or your company or your work. So, share a picture of the cast, share some behind the scenes shots that you made, share a bit of a backstory about why it was made. Anything that you think audiences would be interested in reading or watching or listening to makes for valuable content on social. And then amplify it by using those hashtags, make your Fringe, EdFringe. We can put them in the description here as well. Thanks, Leah. It just helps really boost your show and your story. And then just going back to that impartiality thing, if you tag us at EdFringe and it doesn't wildly violate those very loose terms that we talked about earlier, we'd be happy to retweet it as well and amplify it to our audience.
Becca, would you say that there'd be journalists watching Twitter and other social media as well to find shows to write about? Is it a good place to talk to them?
Oh, well, Katie, that leads me very nicely onto my next thing, which is tweet the media.
It's almost like it was planned.
So a lot of you may have known about Meet the Media. You may have been to Meet the Media in the past, or it may be a brand new concept. But Meet the Media was something that the Fringe Society always organised in Fringe Central. And it was basically an opportunity for participants to pitch directly to journalists if they were looking to get reviews or bums on seats. It was slightly chaotic, I think it's fair to say. A lot of people crammed into one room.
In a beautiful way.
In a beautiful,
definitely
way.
Not COVID safe.
No, not at all. So this year we were thinking, how could we get a lot of participants speaking to the media at once without it being an absolute COVID nightmare? And we have decided to run an event called Tweet the Media over on twitter.com. And that's the nuts and bolts of it. Kind of combine everything we talked about so far. It's getting an elevator pitch together, putting it out in 240 beautiful characters, and then using the hashtag tweet media at the end. We've asked some key journalists if they would be watching that hashtag on a specific day. So just making sure I get this absolutely right. We're doing it on Thursday, the 5th of August, 10 till 6. And we've got some key journalists that will be watching that hashtag at that time, from the likes of Scotsman, BBC, and more to come. If they like what they see with your elevator pitch, if they like Fringe Society the musical and they want to see what Train Spotting and High School Musical together really means, for example, they would like that tweet and then get back in touch with you to hear some more information about how they could go see the show, or how they could review it, or if they could do an interview with you, that kind of thing.
That's brilliant. It's exciting that media lives on, and for even in a post-pandemic world. I also think, Becca, something that another stage that people jump is like thinking about what platform you're using. So like, don't necessarily jump on every social media platform if that's not right for your show. Because also social media often is free in terms of marketing. There's some paid for opportunities there, but a lot of it is like free, but where it really costs is in time. If you're doing it properly and you're researching and you're having conversations and you're reaching out, it can really take a lot of your time and energy. So make sure you're putting that in the right place. So where something like Facebook is, it's a very closed network of your sort of people who already know you. It's hard for people to discover you on there. So I would always use Facebook as a way of rallying the troops, like sort of gathering those people who are already fans of you and letting them know what you're doing. Whereas something like Twitter is a lot more open and you're actually putting out there into the world in a much more visible way. If your show is like really visual, Instagram might be for you. People keep, every year, people are like, how do I use Snapchat? And I'm like, don't.
Is that still going?
Yeah.
I think so, yeah.
Wow.
I've never worked out I've never seen anyone effectively market their show via Snapchat, but maybe it'll happen.
Maybe
someone
TikTok.
used Grindr one year. They were using dating apps as like a swipe, like the amount of sort of ways that people have spread their message over social media apps has been very varied over the years. But it's about finding the right one for your show.
Yeah, Katie mentioned TikTok there. That's absolutely huge if you have, especially for comedians. We've been chatting a little bit to TikTok about ways that we can engage with them. And I think we're really interested to see the way that that's going to play into the Fringe this year, because it was a huge part of lockdown for everyone.
Yeah. Also, do you know, again, I guess a bit of an exclusive. Well, not if you've already registered your show, because you'll have seen it. But we've developed our listings this year to include Spotify and TikTok for the first time. So it means Spotify, you can link to like an album or a track, which means that it could be a music show that's like, this is one of our albums if you want to like check it out and see if we're for you. But it could also be like, we're a theatre show and we've made a playlist that we think sums up the show, like that kind of thing. People are being quite creative with it, but also you can add your TikTok for the first time. And that's something we maybe glossed over earlier. One of the things you can do for absolutely free, or, well, you've paid your registration fee, so make the most of your registration fee, is on your listing, you will notice if you go on tickets.edfringe.com, there's different information for each shows. Some people will just go, there's my copy, there's my image, off into the world. Whereas some people have Facebook, Twitter, Spotify, TikTok, previous reviews on there. Basically, when you register, there's a tab called media content, and as much information as you can provide will just basically like jazz up your listing and make it that much more appealing to people try to figure out if that's the right show for them.
I think
that's grow your audience.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's more important this year than ever, just because there isn't a brochure. Everyone will be going to tickets.edfringe.com to find listings. And so that's where everyone will be going to kind of see what your show is about. So there'll be more opportunity for them to click out to your individual social media or any of your digital assets. So I think populating that as much as you can with as much content is a really, really good opportunity to market your show.
I just want to touch very briefly on paid social media stuff as well, because that's a bit of a minefield, and it's different for different people. But if you're an individual bringing your own show to the Fringe, you're in a slightly different position with social media than a company might be. So if you have a professional page on Facebook, you can put a small amount of money behind posts, and that'll put them into targeted news feeds. So if you, for example, want to reach 18 to 35-year-olds that are in Edinburgh city centre, you can use Facebook's targeted ads to make that happen. But that's only really worthwhile, like Alan said, if you know your audience and you know who you're trying to reach, you know your demographic and who'd be interested in your work. With Twitter and Instagram, that's not as relevant, I don't think, especially Twitter, because it's hugely open access. So you'll be better spending time and energy crafting something that's likely to get shared a lot. You know, the dream is that it would go viral, but even something getting quite a few retweets and going into wider news feeds that way is a way to get kind of more inspiring, energetic marketing posts on Twitter. But Facebook, I'm afraid, is all about the hard money. And even a very small amount, like £10-15, can go quite a long way in terms of Facebook marketing. So it's definitely worth having a look at paid ads and what they can do for you, even on a tiny budget.
I guess now is also a good time to talk about paid for advertising through the Fringe Society. And I do this really quickly because we do not like the hard sell. We're not here to make loads of money off it. And our advertising, it's basically all for our online advertising opportunities, which sits on tickets.edfringe.com in various sort of different ways. It can be a button image or a banner or leaderboard, that kind of thing. There are options there. You can head to our website in the support us section and find out what our fees and booking forms are for this year. It's there as an option. We don't like to do a big hard sale, but what I would say about it is the audience is the people who are on tickets.edfringe looking for shows to see. So that's the one pitch that I feel I should make.
Nice. I am going to move us along quickly because we are running towards the end of our time, and we do still have quite a big topic to cover in PR and media. So we need the who, what, when, where, and why of media and PR, and what kind of support we can give to people to reach out to them. Becca, do you want to take this one as a former journalist?
Yeah, definitely. I've lost my voice just in time for the big me section, so that's always positive.
Well, if Alan has plenty of voice, he can jump in if he feels that you're not covering it.
So I'm
croaking along. So I guess what I want to do just before we delve into this is break down what media means, because that's such a big term, and it's almost like saying artists. You know, it means there are different groups of people within that wider description. And I think the way that you think about that will impact how you contact them and how you speak to them. So like for Fringe purposes, media, I think you can split up into some easy categories. You've got news reporters, people that are looking for kind of big newsy items on the Fringe. So this show is sold out in 10 seconds, can you believe it? Or this show has a controversial topic and it's debuting in Edinburgh. The majority of journalists that engage with the Fringe, I would say, are critics. So they're the people that you want to come in and review your show. And that can be a good and a bad thing. And we'll talk about that in more detail later on. You've also got feature writers. So that's people that will be interviewing artists and producers. And preview writers. So that's people that before your show has happened, they want to give a kind of sneak glimpse about what it is. And that can be really good for marketing your show, because it can kind of give some information to audiences while your tickets are on sale before it's actually happening. So in terms of contacting them, we've spoken a little bit about the media contact list, and that's something that the Fringe Society will give to all registered participants. So we'll kind of break down some key contacts for you to have with their email address, what they're interested in writing about, and how you can contact them. And my absolute top tip before you contact any person from the media is understand what you want from them. So do you want a review? Do you want someone to come and watch your show and write about it? If so, only look at reviewers. And then once you've decided that you want a reviewer to come in, look at the reviewers that will be suitable for your show. Like if you have a musical and it's very serious. Don't contact a reviewer from a comedy magazine because they're likely not to come, and you'll be wasting your time and their time. And it's all about those relationships, right? So look at which reviewers will be right for your show, and that comes from, understanding your USP and your audience again. Once you do get in touch with them, have a bit of patience. Is the key thing. Journalists are always incredibly in demand, and they get a lot of information from PRs and from participants and from artists. So if they don't get back to you right away, that's normal, I would say. And don't be afraid to follow up if you've not heard for if the deadline for your show is coming up and you're like, oh, I need to know if they're coming or not. You can send a very polite email, but don't be too put off if you don't hear from them right away, and just know that that's very normal. Conversely, when journalists want something from you, they will phone you incessantly. That's just the way it is. I've had 3 journalist calls while we've been doing this.
I guess I was just going to say, I was like, remember, journalists are human beings and they are having a busy Fringe just like artists are. And when you're approaching them, it's a reciprocal relationship. It's not just like, you have to review my show or you should, you need to be offering something as well. You need coverage, they need content. And it's about making sure you match up. So I think the thing I learned when marketing my own shows and writing to people was it's about being as direct as possible. Gone are the day, no BCCing everyone you want to email into one generic thing. Something that I was surprised at, I remember I learned back in the day, when I was first doing the Fringe, was I always thought everyone loved an attachment. I was like, I'm just going to attach my press release that I've had designed up into a really pretty PDF. No, generally, it's heartbreaking if you've got a really pretty PDF that if someone requests it, you can absolutely send that. But if you're just sending out to someone trying to get their interest, you want all that copy in the body of an email. You want your email to be as low in terms of how much space it takes up in someone's inbox as possible. You want the information to be as clear as possible, and you want it to be as personal as possible, not in a sort of stalkery way of hi, I know that you love X, Y, and Z, but just in a way of hi, I'm getting in touch because I've got a show. I know that you've reviewed new writing in Scotland before, so I think that's exactly what my show is. I think you'd really like it. It's on in person and then online for the second half of the Fringe. It'd be really great to have a conversation about it. Please find my press release below. Something like that, quick, but just personalized with someone's hello, Becca, rather than, if there's one thing I could eviscerate from existing, people who do dear sirs.
I get so much dear sirs.
Yeah, women are journalists too, people. But also it's just so to whom it may concern. It just I think we've probably all received an email at some point that said, to whom it may concern or something. And you're like, well, I don't need to read that one. Or oh, I'm really busy. That one doesn't matter. It's taken less seriously. Whereas if you're hi, I'm getting in touch because, and then it shows that that person's done a little bit of research, and actually they don't just want a review. Because what Becca said about the quality of it, getting a review can be a good or a bad thing. So you actually don't just want anyone to review your show. You want someone who you think has the best chance of liking what you're doing and syncing up with what you're doing.
Completely. And read reviews that they've done before, because if you don't like their style of writing, there's no point in asking them to do a review of your show because you're not going to like the product. So, if you can read reviews they've done before, send them a snippet of a review and say, I really like the style of writing that you used in this review. I really like what you said about this show. This show is similar to my show. I hope you'll come and see it. Or, make it direct, make it targeted.
And in the same way, so reviews are great for helping sell shows, but actually what they could do is help you more down the line on your next journey, because that journalist is going to come in and then they have to take time to actually write the review and then to get the content up. So it's not an instantaneous thing. Mm-hmm. So if I could say one thing in terms of journalists and reviews, do not rely on them in your campaign. Your campaign shouldn't be we're going to get a really good review really early doors and then use that to sell out. That's a great plan, but it's very unrealistic because you're putting all of your eggs literally in one basket. Whereas I think it should be, getting reviews should be part of your campaign, but not the sole crux of it. You're much better off we're getting preview coverage, or, I've emailed this journalist and been I've noticed that there's loads of shows all about activism this year, and they're all doing it slightly different. Or I've noticed there's a lot of gig theatre this year, or there's this really sort of specific group of comedy shows that are happening online. If you can find that niche and say the journalist like, hi Becca, I realized you're covering a lot of great stuff at the Fringe this year. I'm bringing this show that's all about activism, and I've noticed these other 4. I don't know if that's a potential theme for you. Like you're almost doing the journalist job for them there, and it's helping like create content in a really positive way rather than just being like, hi, I've got a show, you should review it.
Get to know as well the kind of festival and publication circuit. There are some magazines, some supplements that come out every single year, and know which ones are looking for content ahead of time and make sure you approach them in a timely manner. You know, like odds are if you have an idea for a preview or a feature, or you want to get an interview into say like one of the weekend supplements for a newspaper, that content will have been planned out for like 3 weeks already. There'll be no new space for it. So be thinking about this stuff early on. I know we're in a slightly different position this year because we're going on sale a lot later and the Fringe is like round the corner. But the good news is media are in the same position. They're all crying out for coverage, and they want to feature Fringe shows. They want to hear about Fringe shows. So
yeah, my next question was going to be, when is the best time to get in touch? But obviously we're now, there are shows on sale, not sales on show. And obviously journalists are already writing about the Fringe. So I guess the best time to get in touch is now, especially if your show is already on sale.
Yeah, I think when your show's on sale is a really great time to like either follow up from one that you sent before it went out, or like to just kind of follow, because sometimes what Becca was saying, like being able to follow up without it seeming rude, like the difference between a pester and a follow-up is a very fine line, but one that you should be able to tread easily. And it's the difference between being like, I don't know if you got my last email. Everyone gets emails. Don't be like, I don't know if you got my, like, you don't have to be passive aggressive. It can literally be like, hey, I'm just following up as the show's now on sale. Or, oh, we got this review. We'd still love to get you, like, give them slight new information. Or, oh, we've now cast the show. Or, oh, we now have a trailer. Like, if you can be giving some sort of new information, but what you're actually doing is just like, just going to ping this on the top of your inbox rather than the bottom, then I think that's a really sort of positive way to communicate with people.
Definitely. And just speaking of positive communication, like I think one thing to flag here, which is quite delicate, but it's like a journalist isn't a PR. And so no matter how much you engage them, and it's always brilliant to get media coverage, sometimes that coverage might not be what you want to read, and it might not help you in your publicity aims. The last year I was a Fringe reviewer, the very first Fringe show I saw invited me to a preview. And they just weren't ready to be reviewed at that point, which is absolutely fine. But my advice would be, like, if you're not ready to have somebody honestly and fairly critique something or to write about it, don't invite them into that space just yet. So the show had its issues in terms of, like, it wasn't quite production ready, and there were forgotten lines and missed props and things like that happen in previews, and that's what previews are for. But afterwards, the director came to me and another journalist and begged me not to be honest in the review. But that's not what the journalist will do. So I would think very carefully about the timing of approaching a journalist, and that they're bound to be truthful. It's their integrity and their job too. So, like, make sure that when you're thinking about the right time to approach them, you know that you're ready as well, because they have to be honest.
Yeah. Similarly, so if reviews are good, absolutely, you can link to them, you can share them, you can amplify them, you can take those pull quotes and stars and put them on any print that you do have your in-person show or on your social media. And if you're going through the online method, great, you can amplify them and they can genuinely help. On the flip side, if you get a bad one, you can just as easily not talk about it. People will only be like, a lot of the times people won't necessarily have sought it out by themselves. And if you just don't talk about it, it quickly can pass, unless you're going to do something really cool and creative with it, where I've seen people be like, oh, my show's got a 5-star and a 1-star. You decide. And that I think is really clever. What I wouldn't do is publicly or privately with the journalist, like become antagonistic or say the journalist was wrong because I would say almost every single time you come out of it looking bad.
Completely damage a relationship.
Yeah. And I think if I see a show like not just Fringe, like in the whole world, if I see anyone kind of like snapping back at criticism, it very rarely makes that person come out in a good light. Because it comes across as a little bit bitter, and that's it's really hard because it's an emotional thing. Having work you've done be received badly. But I would honestly, the best thing to do is be like, okay, cool. We've taken on that feedback. Don't reply with anger, I think is my tip.
I have quite a unique experience in this. Like I say, I've had 2 Fringe shows, right? This isn't a brag, so I'm about to get very, very dark. But the first one got like 3 5-star reviews and a 4-star. And I was delighted. And I felt like, yeah, you know what? I got the Fringe. I'm going to come back next year. And I got 3 2-star reviews. And somebody said my writing was awful. And so it can change. Like, you know, nothing's guaranteed. And what I learned from that 2-star experience is that you've got to listen to what's being said and use that as feedback to create, a better piece of work for yourself. And like Helen said, I just ignored them and nothing really bad happened.
Yeah. Similarly, on the flip side, I've had shows where, got a couple of 5-star reviews and that was great and loved putting those stars in our flyers. But the review themselves, I'm like, they're saying very nice things, but I'm not quite sure they understood the show. Whereas we got a 3-star review from the list, which was glowing. It was the classic phrase of, it reads like a 4. I mean, a 4 would have been great. But so we didn't necessarily put 3 stars in our flyer, but all of our pull quotes came from the list review because they were so complimentary about it. And they were they'd summed it really well. They were like, they're a young company finding their feet, but they have great potential. And this bit was amazing. And these performances were great. And the writing was sophisticated. And we're like, cool, we're good. We don't care. It's a 3. They're saying incredible things. Whereas the 5 was like, this is a show about technology. And we're like, no, it's not. So it's that thing of take everything at face value for what it is and use it effectively when it can be used, and then when it's not.
I'm going to ask one last question before we move on, because we have that interview with Emma Martin that we want to switch to right after this. We haven't talked at all about audience reviews, and they are such a powerful tool in your arsenal of marketing your show and getting the word out there. So, Alan, will you very, very, very succinctly talk about audience reviews, please?
Yep. Audience reviews are essentially what they say in the tin. They're reviews by people who've seen your show that they can leave on edfringe.com. You can opt in or out of them on your registration, email registration at edfringe.com if you want to change that. Essentially, it's reviews that you, I think, have a bit more control of. Because if after your show, if people have responded, you can be like, oh, if you like the show, please go, it's as easy as signing into edfringe.com the way you would if you're buying a ticket, finding our show and clicking on leaving a review. That's people who've already seen your show. Or if someone comes up to you on social media or in person after the show and goes, oh my God, we really loved that. You can actually go oh, do you know what would be really helpful? You could leave us a review and tell them where to go. Tell them to just log in and leave a review. And it can be something that's really helpful. I wasn't sure on audience reviews when they first came in. They're fairly new to the Fringe landscape. I've been saying that for a while, so they might not be.
I don't think they're that new.
But they used to be something that people were a bit wary of, or people didn't take as seriously. Now, I know people, I've decided to go to shows because I'm they've not had a professional review yet, but they have 6 5-star reviews from audience. I always if they've had 6 5s and then a couple of 4s, because I'm okay, this doesn't feel fake. this feels legitimate. People have ideas, but I think they're whatever we've said about marketing your show, word of mouth remains one of the most important ways of a Fringe show becoming successful. And audience reviews are just a great way for that to happen.
Yeah, I completely agree. Becca, have you anything to add about audience reviews?
Just love them.
I love leaving them. I because we have to be impartial as audience members at the Fringe Society. I always have to do them under a different name, but I love leaving them. I love boosting the shows.
Do you have a pseudonym?
Well, I'm not going to tell you it now, obviously.
Yeah, no.
Anyway,
exclusive.
Oh, look, you're going to have to hunt me out on edfringe.com. Shall we wrap up? Alan, I'm going to hand back to you to wrap up because you're always really good at it and you can lead into Emma's interview quite nicely.
Cool. All I'll say is I hope you found this useful. Thank you for sticking with us if you've listened this far. You can get in touch with us at any point on fringecast@edfringe.com if you'd like to sort of ask any follow-up questions. Media advice at edfringe.com is our email address for artists looking for support in their media campaign if you want clarification and thing we've said. But genuinely, I'd be like, your media and marketing campaign is something that can be really stressful, but we're here to support in any way we can. And also, we've talked about a lot over the past hour, or however long it's been. Sorry, Leah, who's helping with the edit. And just go easy on yourself. Like, make sure you, if you've got any questions, throw them to us. Don't try and do everything. Try and do what you know you can do effectively. So yeah, thank you for joining us today. And now we're going to throw to Emma, who hopefully we've hyped up enough in this event. Very much looking forward to being part of your Fringe Connect event on the 5th of August. But yeah, this is the lovely Becca sitting down to discuss marketing your show with Emma Martin. Enjoy, and we'll see you again soon.
Bye.
Bye.
So, Emma, thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure.
Just tell us a little bit about yourself and
Yeah,
your
of course.
event at Fringe Connect.
Absolutely. So my name is Emma Martin. I am a theatre marketer, a freelance theatre marketer. Most people go, what on earth is that? And essentially, I basically help shows sell. So that can be either just off West End productions, it could be shows going to Edinburgh, it can be companies. So I work for a couple of companies as their commerce managers. And essentially I work on developing artwork and strategy and helping shows sell their tickets. Essentially, bums on seats is my job. I love working for, the reason I got into freelance arts marketing is that I love the show side of things. So I like to be involved in the show. I'm also really passionate, as you may hear in a bit, about marketing being at the center of the creation of a show as well, and the thought process behind a show. So I love working on production. So that's my kind of, I do particularly like new writing. But really, yeah, I love to be part of the team that creates the work. And for me, a company that put marketing in that stage of things means that the work is much easier, hopefully. But yeah, you have to have a lot of passion and energy to work in marketing. But I love it. Theatre is my passion. So getting people to come and see the work makes me very happy.
Oh, amazing. I guess 2020 changed things a little bit.
Yeah.
We saw that massive pivot.
I was about to say the word pivot. The word pivot has been, yeah, absolutely. And for me, interestingly, one of my companies had probably the most successful year they've ever had. Interestingly, because they basically, a lot of companies I work for are commercial. They have to make money, and if it stops, income stops coming in, there's no way of paying anyone. And one of the companies I worked for went from touring regional theatre to overnight. We realised quite quickly, okay, can we film 2 shows in a week? We did. We released them online for not very much money as a starting point, and we started to grow an online platform for our audiences. So suddenly, as you say, very quickly, I moved into working with purely digital audiences, which both sort of reduce and expand your approaches in marketing. So for the last year, I've done a lot with original theatre, who do a lot of online work, and that can be live streaming. It can be, some of the shows we did were literally filmed on iPhones in people's living rooms and made into a play. It was amazing. There was some that were filmed in people's back gardens when they were pretending to be in the trenches. It was very impressive. And then things like I did Peter Duncan's online panto at Christmas. So a real variety of work. And it's really, as you said, it's sort of opened up opportunities to have a look at different ways of talking to audiences, and audiences who may not always go to the theatre, or for access reasons or for geography reasons, don't get to know your work. So certainly it's been a really interesting opportunity to see how you can approach brand and audience and marketing in a solely digital way, whereas I spent my 11 years of my career putting up posters, putting flyers through people's letterboxes, direct mail, getting people through a door. So to get people to engage with you online has been a really interesting curve for quite a lot of theatre companies that I've worked with.
Gosh, I bet. But despite all those kind of differences, what are the fundamentals that remain the same, would you say, between marketing online work and in-person work?
Yeah, I mean, I think basically, fundamentally, I do think the initial strategy and planning is the same. The platforms you use may vary, but for me, I always start with my audience. Like, why have I made the show, or why have my colleagues made the show? Who have they made it for, and why will they be interested? I always say comments like, marketing is too important to be left to the marketing department. It's also too important to be left to the end of your planning. It's like, you need to know who your audience are and who you want to see in that front row. And that will be the core of any campaign you do, whether it be for online or for in-person. And then once you have a feel of an idea of your audience and your selling points, that then feeds into everything else. So for me, that's really cool. Like, for example, when you're developing artwork, you need to make sure that you're appealing to the right audiences and you're communicating your selling points. Now, that piece of artwork may be a poster outside a theatre. It may be a GIF online. It may be, the selling image. It may be on social. It's as much as where it sits could be different, or the amount of stuff you can do with it may be different. You can do a lot more online, and you can play with things a lot more online. But essentially, for me, everything comes down to who are your audience and why are they interested. And if you don't know that, and you haven't started fundamentally in that initial stage of planning, you're going to find the process much harder, and people are going to find it harder to find you. So for me, that starting point hasn't altered at all. The people I'm thinking about may have altered. They may live in New York, they may live in the backcountry, wherever it is, but it's still, that is the beginning of my approach, which I think for me is the fundamental thing that you just never should change when you're looking at your marketing.
And are there any specific things that you feel like you should change when you're marketing purely digital work?
Yeah, I think what's really interesting when you're marketing purely digital work is that you're looking at a much wider marketing place. So that can be easier and harder at the same time. But when you're advertising a show in a venue or at a festival, you know geographically where your audience are. You can reach them through posters and flyering, but online this needs to be done digitally. You can still do that. You can still get them to see your poster, as it were, and you can still target them with your digital version of a flyer, whether it be an ad. But obviously it needs to get to them in their homes, and there's a much wider sphere of audience you can work to. So, what I've done a lot more of, obviously, is online marketing. So it's use of newsletters and swaps with other theatre companies, and all that has come further forward in my planning. There's stuff I've always done, but it's stuff that has to become the first point of call. You haven't got the, direct mail, you're going to drop to your 300 people who always come to your venue, or you can't stand on the mile and flyer people every day. You've got to think about how you can use your own social media profiles instead of posters. You can use targeted ads instead of flyers. But with that being such a wide audience, your opportunity's there, but then you have to think even more carefully about who you're targeting, because you can't just go on and press, I want to target people who like theatre in the UK or the USA or Europe. That's such a big marketplace. Now, potentially you could almost do that in a very tiny geographic spread. But when you're looking at something digitally where you have got the world is slightly your oyster, you've got to make sure that you are focusing much more. You're finding that with digital work, it's really the highly engaged theatre audiences that are engaging best. So it's not just, maybe someone who would go to theatre once a year, which you might get to your show. Obviously, somewhere like the Fringe, people are turning up and they're willing to try anything they want. What you're seeing with digital audiences, I think, is that it's a very highly engaged group of people. So I think it's about finding those smaller groups in the wide sphere rather than talking to everyone in the same way and everyone at the same time. But the beauty of digital means that you can be responsive with that. So you can try, you can try and talk to people who, like theatre and potentially thrillers and like this and that. And, you can absolutely drill down. And I think it's about that. It's about drilling down even further which maybe you wouldn't approach in such a targeted way if you're just focusing on the geographic spread of, you know, Edinburgh or wherever it is, or Yvonne Arno Guildford. You know, you've got such a wide amount of people that you really have to think even more carefully, so you don't waste your money targeting anyone who's like something involving theatre across the globe, because absolutely you're not going to hit the people you need to bring in your income. That makes sense.
Oh, definitely. And speaking of income, I guess a lot of people's budgets are a lot smaller this year, or they might be. The pandemic's just been, you know, so tough for artists. If you had a really limited marketing budget, what kind of priorities would you suggest people put in place for their campaigns?
So I think what's really interesting is that I don't think a lot of my work has been based on not having very massive budget. And I don't think you need a massive budget to make an impact. But I do think you can start by doing things like, you know, trying to get the best artwork you can manage within your budget. You know, if you can find a designer who you can speak to about your budget, be honest with people you're talking to. You can do a lot in a small time, but make sure that everything you do is as best as you can do it in that point. So things like artwork, for example, you know, it's making sure it stands out and it looks quality. And you can do that with stock imagery. You can do that quite cheaply. If you can look through other shows that you like with similar artwork. If you can communicate really quickly to a designer and you can be really open with them, you can come up with something that looks really nice with not too much of your spend. And then I think you can then focus on things that you can do for free before you do your advertising as well. So content's really helpful, right? So you can help your audiences to get to know your show better without spending lots of money. It costs time, and time obviously does cost money in the big scheme of things, but think about the time you might be able to give to it. Can you do this? Can you do a lovely, you know, interview on Zoom? Can you host a Q&A? Could you do a cooking class, a clip from the show? You know, there's lots of different things you can do. You can create content for very low cost. People have got used to, particularly in the pandemic, getting their phones out. You know, we're okay with that. You can introduce people to your work. You don't have to spend huge amounts of money on that kind of stuff. Even making stuff accessible, YouTube subtitles, you can edit those subtitles for free. There's lots of things you can do. So when you get to actually the sort of cold hard cash, you can make sure you're putting that into, say, things like your targeted Facebook groups and your targeted newsletter ads that feel right for your audiences, but back that up with grassroots. So what I call grassroots. So that's basically going directly to people or doing the kind of organic side of things. So yes, you have a targeted Facebook ad that, you know, you've put a bit of money behind, but while you're doing that and thinking about the audiences, you know, add something to a Facebook group, email a publication and offer them a competition, you know, talk to other theatre companies, other venues, do swaps, send offer codes to student groups. Now, it may sound like a huge amount of stuff to do, and you can obviously reduce that down depending on how much capacity time-wise you have. But I think it's really important that any bit of spend you do is balanced out with not spend. You know, you can spend a bit of advertising money on Facebook that'll help you get to audience. You can buy a newsletter that will help you get to your audience. But anything you can do, even sending a WhatsApp message to your friends saying, this is my show, please share it. That's marketing. Anything you can do to put your vision and your show in front of a potential customer is absolutely worthwhile. So whilst obviously spend is important, and you should think about that when you're budgeting for a show, is making sure you have got a budget for marketing, because marketing should always gain income, right? You should always see what we call an ROI, return on investment on your spend. But don't let it hold you back from doing all the other stuff you can do that doesn't cost money. Obviously time, and you can always start with the most impactful one. But I think, you know, what I often find is that people don't even know. I was talking to an actor and writer today who were doing their show, and she's working with a charity organisation to help her write her piece. And I said to her, well, when you finish talking to them, link me up and I'll see what we can do. They might be able to put an offer code in their newsletter. They might, you know, it's anyone connected to the project even. You know, look at the people you're working with. Everyone could be a marketeer. All it means is putting your work in front of someone's face, essentially, who might buy it. So I think, you know, never sit there and go, oh, I've only got, you know, a small, tiny budget, I can't do marketing. No, if you have time, you can do marketing. And I think for me, the best campaigns are a mixture of both anyway. No matter how big my budget is, even the biggest budgets I work on, I will always do my grassroots stuff, because one ticket is one ticket. You know, a swap is a swap. If you can get a couple of click-throughs and someone to buy, you're winning. So yeah, I think the budgets are obviously difficult and it's a really tough time. And the beauty of digital is that you can test. You know, you can put some money behind things and see how well they're working. But don't ever let a small budget stop you from doing the other marketing that I think is crucial to put a show on.
And one of those kind of crucial grassroots pieces is social media, the devil itself. All the, you know, it's just an amazing tool as well.
It's an amazing tool.
What kind of top tips do you have for using social media within your marketing?
I remember what someone once saying to me, and I do probably repeat it too much. Don't judge social by its ability to sell tickets, but it can really help to sell tickets. So a lot of people go, "Oh, I can't. It's not going to sell all my tickets." And I think if you only see social as a selling tool, it's not going to do its best work for you. Social is about a lot more than that. But for me, my top tip in then making that successful is planning. You can plan social quite easily these days. You know, if you can hop on one, you know, if you just end up going on once a day and putting out a quick reminder to buy tickets, we all know. The thing is, we do it ourselves and then we realize we never look at any tweets that say just buy my ticket, unless you desperately needed that reminder, which is you do sometimes. But you can create a little content planner. It doesn't have to be anything special, but think about what excited and interested you in the show. Like, share your research. I'm always asking, like, writers and actors and directors, send me what did you do to get this play together? What did you read? You know, what did you listen to? What podcast? You know, share the research, share your interviews, you know, do takeovers, engage with people, engage with other companies or conversations, and respond to your audiences. You know, if you have time, you can, you know, if you can carve out even an hour or so a week to sit down. You know, Twitter has its own scheduling platform. It's free. You know, Instagram and Facebook, you can schedule using Facebook Creator Studio, all free. And if you know, sit down on a Monday morning and schedule some social media to go out through the week, you know, you don't have to panic every day and just put out a don't forget to book. You can think about it. You can plan it. So I think planning social for me is a really big thing. Obviously, react and engage. And a lot of people talk about the 80-20 rule for social media, particularly for Twitter, I'd say probably. And it's not hard and fast rule, and there's loads of debates about it. But I think it's quite a good way of starting to think about what your content should look like. And basically they say, you know, 80% of the time you should be educated, entertaining, engaging with your audience. And 20% of the time is about promotion and selling. And it's not, I said, it's no hard and fast rule, but if you look at it like that, you then won't necessarily feel the pressure to make sure you sold 100 tickets because of a tweet you sent out. But it's always a bit of a longer and bigger process. It's about communication, and it's about conversation, and it's about, you know, brand is often sounds like a really cold word, but I really love the word brand, because for me it just means your company, what you mean, what you're about, and you know, that's all part of it. And if your social media, you want to get it to a point where it does convert eventually to ticket sales, or it leads people to stuff, you've got to be in a place that people want to hear from you and want to know what you've got to say. So yeah, for me, it's all about planning, engaging, sharing, so you can share with other people as well, and just building up interest in the show and your journeys. Because let's be honest, our favorite things that we all love are always behind the scenes, or always something that just goes, oh yeah, that's, you know, think about the things you read on social and think about the things that would engage the people you're focusing on. But yeah, I think don't sit there thinking that every tweet has to sell you a ticket, or that even Twitter in general has to sell you lots of tickets. It's about supporting a campaign and working smartly and planning, but also just have a bit of, you know, make sure it's not all about the sell, because social is much more than that.
Totally. That was so useful, Emma. Thank you so much. I think before we wrap up, I just have like one kind of very broad question. So if you had one top tip and one thing to avoid in marketing your show, what would they be?
So probably they come from the same place, I probably would do. So my top tip, as you may have already guessed from the way I speak about audiences, is target everything you do. Always think about that audience, whether it's like a Facebook ad, a social media post, a Zoom interview, the artwork. Like, it should always be interesting to the audience you want to come and see your show. So always think about that person on the other end of it. I feel like a lot of the time that's what the marketer does in a meeting, right? Is go, but who is this for? Or like, who are we talking to? And you can test. I mean, with digital, you can test and check if the audience are engaging. They said so in sort of flip side of that to avoid then would probably be for me, avoid creating content. What I find sometimes is people create content that maybe for them as the artist rather than for your audience. So sometimes I see either artwork or content that's assuming people will come, and it's just about telling, about what they were interested in or what they wanted to put on the poster. Sometimes I read copy that's overcomplicated, and if I can't get people to test it for you, send it to your aunt, your sister, your niece, your nephew, your grand. My mum, I do the mum test all of the time. The amount of times I send stuff to my mum and be like, what's this term about? Because for me, I know what it's about. And particularly if you're creatively involved in the show, I've been in artwork discussions where there's this really complex idea and it's going to be beautiful and amazing, but is it going to tell an audience anything? What is it going to tell that audience? So I think it'd be avoid creating content just because you're interested in that for the show. In the flip side, always that's about that, always thinking about, why would they be interested in your show? They're not just going to come. They are like, then that's a really harsh thing, because sometimes that feels like, oh, everyone's going to, oh, don't worry, but think about who you want to engage with, and, and then they will come because they're interested in what you put in front of them. So yeah, I think kind of avoiding stuff that's about that kind of assumptions and stuff that potentially can be too complex and too much about the show. So maybe my actual tip is do the friend or family test. Send it to them, send them the piece of artwork and go, what's this play about? I've done that before with titles of stuff where I was like, is that title, like, how is that phrase, does that make sense? And I'll just pop it in my family WhatsApp and be like, what's this play about? Would you come? What's interesting? And that is probably the quickest and easiest test. If you know who your audience are, see if they can test check it for you, because that honestly, the amount of times I've done that and it's really helped, because you can get so close to stuff that you just can't see. So maybe my number one tip is friend, family testing, because it's just a lovely little way of being like, have I got this right?
I love that. A lot of family WhatsApp groups are going to light up after this.
Aren't they? Do it. Will be my fault. I love it. I get all people, I don't want to look at another poster. But it's amazing how close you can get to something and not see. And I think that's what's interesting with when you sometimes bring a marketeer on board, or get anyone external, is that hopefully they're thinking about it from a different perspective. And your perspective is brilliant because it's, know so much about the show, and that is crucial. And I love working with creators and people who've made the show, because they get so much from them and it really helps. But there's always that moment where you need to step back and just see what, Penny thinks, what they think it's about, and what they would like to see.
Always get Penny's opinion.
Always get Penny's opinion. Penny's got good opinions.
Emma, thank you so much. That was incredibly
my
useful.
pleasure.